Lots of people talk about chasing their dreams, but how many actually do it? Welcome to the Pursue Your Passion podcast with Tyler Kammerman. We're going to introduce you to people who are intentionally pursuing their passion every day. Through their stories of success and their struggles, you'll gain insight into how to better begin or continue your journey. Now here's Tyler with today's guest.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Pursue Your Passion podcast. Tyler Kammerman here with you, and I am excited to have Luke Meek with me here today. Hello, Luke.
Hello, man. Thanks for having me. Good to be here. I'm super excited.
I am excited to be chatting with you as well. Luke is, he's a pilot, but I'm guessing we'll talk a little bit about that. But he has toured for over 15 years as a production manager, traveled to all 50 of the United States and more than 35 countries. He's worked in legendary venues like Madison Square Garden, coordinated production for television performances worldwide, and entertained troops abroad aboard an aircraft carrier in the Persian Gulf. He's found himself in many difficult situations throughout his career. He's made mistakes, like we all have, and learned hard lessons. And he's continued to refine his approach for better performance and more efficient work to benefit himself and the people that he works with. And because there's really no how-to manual in the live production industry, he founded The Efficient Hustle as a way to share what he's learned. So among other things, The Efficient Hustle is definitely one of the things we're going to be talking about. But once again, Luke, welcome to the show.
Cool. Thanks, man. I'm excited to be here. Lots to say, lots to talk about, lots of passions and some efficiencies.
Awesome. Well, you led us into the way that I like to kick off pretty much every show. So tell us about the passion or passions that you're currently pursuing.
Yeah, man. I mean, some of them are kind of long running. Some of them are newer. I would say just in no necessarily certain order, but one passion of mine that has been going for a long time is, I would say, longevity. Like, I'm a health nut. So like, longevity as in, I don't want to live to be 150 years old, but the years that I'm here, I want to be healthy and very active. So yeah. Like I said, I'm a health nut. I eat real clean. I exercise a lot. That's a big thing to me. And that's a passion, an ongoing one that I could talk all day about. Obviously another one, well, not obviously yet, but by the time the end of this podcast, you'll know, like, production and live sound and touring is another passion of mine, and something that I've been doing most of my adult life. And we can get into that more as far as what I'm passionate about as far as in that world. Cause part of that is not even the production side of it, but just the efficiencies and professionalism that I like to talk a lot about. I'm really passionate about efficiency. Another thing that's kind of come up in the last chunk of years, I don't know, 2018, 2019 is writing. I'm really into writing these days. I do blogs. I do a monthly newsletter. Are things that kind of like little things that let me get some of my creativity out. But then, of course, I just released a book this summer, which was a big undertaking and allowed me to really dig in deep on that passion. We can obviously talk more about that. I'm a private pilot, so flying is a passion of mine. I've got my private pilot's license in 2017. So I think I started training in maybe 2015 or 16. I can't even remember. So I've been, flying has been a thing of mine for a long time. And like, if you're a pilot, then by default, it kind of has to be your passion if you're going to stay with it, because you need to stay current and you need to fly, and you want to become a better and better pilot. So like it or not, that's a passion. And then one that's like kind of new and like really just kind of coming to fruition as far as new passions of mine is entrepreneurship. Like, I really want to buy and run a business of some sort. As opposed, I say buy because, a lot of people are thinking like, I have this idea and I want to start a business. I'm not like super pumped on starting a business. I would do it, but I'm like, my main thing is like, I want to find one that's up and running and doing well and taking it over and learning about entrepreneurship that way. So that's a lot of things, a lot of passions, a lot of, I feel kind of like I was saying before we started recording, is like everything. I feel like my whole life is starting one big needle, because those are a lot of balls to juggle. So I always have a lot of things going on, and it's hard to keep focused and make sure that something's moving, the needles are moving on all the things.
Well, you definitely got you definitely got a lot of balls in the air for sure, juggling lots of things. Well, we got introduced for the listeners. Luke and I got introduced through Jason Wallsmith, who I interviewed a few episodes back. They've known each other for a long time. Luke, you've kind of cut your teeth in the production management side of things, touring. Walk us through kind of how you stepped into music, how that evolved into into the efficient hustle, so to speak.
Yeah. All right, cool. Well, in the name of efficiency, I'll give you the bullet point view of it because it's a long story. What could be its own podcast.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to succinctly say, hey, here's the last 25 years or 20 years, whatever it is. So,
but there are some kind of prime bullet points that are helpful. So I was going to community college in Fort Dodge. I was born and raised in Fort Dodge, Iowa. So I was going to community college there. I knew I needed to do something. I liked music. So I was like, I'll work in a recording studio. So I went to audio school, learned audio, eventually moved to Iowa City where I worked for a club doing live sound. So after I got out of audio school, I didn't really do recording studio stuff because in Iowa at the time, and probably still now, there was more live venues than recording studios. So by default, I started doing live sound in 1999. That's where I met Jason and Nadas and started doing that stuff. So I did that for a few years and cut my teeth there on the live sound thing. And then I moved to Denver and I lived there for 3 years doing production, not just live sound, but all the production stuff. I learned lighting and video and more audio and all that kind of stuff. A lot of corporate kind of gigs and big keynote speaking events and, big fancy like $1 million weddings and $500,000 mitzvahs and all those kind of production on another, on a bigger level, but not necessarily music. And then I circled back and started touring with the Nadas and I went back to Iowa and did that for 3 years. And then I needed to, I knew it was time to move on and kind of keep climbing. So I moved to LA where I was for 12 years. And that's when, so basically once I started with the Nadas, that was when like touring for me was my, I was a freelancer. I've been a freelancer ever since, which that was 2005. So I started freelancing and touring with the Nadas and then just went from there. And I've been doing it ever since. I was in LA for 12 years touring, international stuff. And that's when I started doing production management in addition to audio. And then Nashville a few years back, but still kind of doing the audio thing. So that's a super, super condensed version of it. But, that's basically the vibe. Is like I got out of audio school and then kind of figured out how to go from there,
Yeah. Yeah. So Iowa, Denver, Los Angeles, then Nashville.
Yeah.
Is that right?
A trip back to Iowa, Denver, Iowa, LA.
Gotcha. Okay. Gotcha.
And then Nashville. Yeah.
And then just out of curiosity,
in Minneapolis.
What prompted the moving LA to Nashville?
I'd been in LA for 12 years. I mean, that's basically what it was. It was like, it was good until it wasn't,
Yeah.
LA is a crazy place and I really like to live in there and I'm glad I went there and I wouldn't change it. But at some point I was like, man, I'm kind of tired of sitting in traffic. And so It was like quality of life and cost of living is why I left LA and, how we chose Nashville because my wife is also from Iowa.
Okay.
So we're Midwest people. We're happy to kind of do that, come back towards the Midwest, but we're also pretty fair weather people. So we knew we couldn't go too far north. So Nashville ended up being the kind of happy middle ground. And, production wise and career wise, it made sense for me. Although I wouldn't say that played a very big role because, I'm a touring guy. So all I need to do is be close to an airport and I can go anywhere.
You can go. Yeah. No, I figured it had something to do with that. We lived there for 8 years and
nice.
I don't know. Yeah. I mean, our stories are completely different. My dad got sick. That's why we moved back. But I don't know that we would have been there much longer than that anyway, for the same reasons. I mean, it's, I just think about, owning a home and things like that as well. It's just so expensive to do it there.
Mm-hmm.
So touring, like you said, you were on the audio side of things. You got more into the actual managing. Earlier, you said efficiency is one of your passions, and that kind of led into the efficient hustle. So was it, let's unpack that a little bit. How do you go from, hey, I manage it, I'm a tour manager to all of a sudden I'm like, I start seeing all these efficiencies or inefficiencies. Or was that kind of a long process as well?
It was a bit of a process, but it kind of by default, it had to happen pretty quickly because, kind of like what I talk about in my book is like, I was doing my thing, but it's like, production management on tour is very busy. And if you don't get your stuff together, you're going to drop a lot of balls and things are going to get missed, but also you're not going to sleep or have time to eat food. So it's like, I realized like, man, there's a lot of information coming in. I need to figure out how to keep all of this straight to make sure I've, done my due diligence, in the days and weeks leading up to a show. And then also it's like, man, there's gotta be a better way to do these things in general, to where it's, not everything takes as much time as it was taking for me earlier in my career. So I was like, well, I need to figure out how to, organize all the data that's coming in, and how do I, design my day so I can actually stop and have lunch. And when I go to sleep, I'm not like I'm not in the tour bus laying in my bunk, like checking my email before I go to sleep, like freaking out that I forgot something or missed something. It's like, so it's like by default, I just realized pretty quickly, like there has to be a better way, and I have to figure that better way out if I'm going to keep my sanity.
Yeah, for sure. So there's all these questions that it's like, well, how do I give them, a 2 to 5 minute answer rather than an hour long answer? But I want to ask more about the process and the efficient hustle, the book, and just, what you've put together there. But I know that there are, as a part of I've seen your resume. So what I'm trying to get to is, I know for listeners, they're familiar with a lot of the people that you've worked with. So if you don't mind name dropping a little bit, I'd love you to share a little bit about your resume and kind of how that maybe even played into, getting to where you were of coming up with this process.
Yeah, man. I'm always like, I'm not good on the spot when I think of who I've worked with, because there's been a lot, but also some of them are much more in depth. So I guess I would say, like, for example, the book centers around my first tour I did with an artist from Minnesota called Owl City. And, I used that time period because that time period was like, they had like, right about the time I came on board, they just had their second big hit single. And so it was like, that was extremely crazy for me. I mean, I had done production management, I had done a little bit of TV stuff and whatever, but like not on that level and not international either. So Owl City is one of them that, I've been working with ever since. I do stuff with them here and there. I do stuff with, man, again, it's hard to think, but like Andrew McMahon in the Wilderness, who was also from Something Corporate, and Jack Mannequin. I did a couple tours with him. I do, I've just done a lot of short run stuff. I did like some stuff with Leah, Michelle, and Darren, Chris. I did a tour with them. Those people are from Glee.
Yeah.
If some people will recognize them. And then, a lot of stuff where like, I'm with, the direct support for a band. Like I did a tour with Need to Breathe when they were opening for Taylor Swift.
Oh, cool.
I did a tour with Fifth Harmony when they were opening for Demi Lovato. Owl City did a handful of tours opening for different artists. We did some stuff with Room 5. We did not a tour, but like a handful of shows with Justin Bieber back in the day, and that was crazy. So, the list, like I said, like the list is pretty extensive. And a lot of it's people I've worked directly with, a lot of tours I've done that maybe I wasn't with the headlining artist. So it's kind of all over the board.
No, that's great.
Yeah.
I love that a love for music can go in a lot of different directions. And I just kind of had this realization. A lot of people put together their guests for their podcast, and they've got kind of this like, hey, this is the arc that I'm going for this season. I just kind of think about, who I get introduced to and who I think would be interesting to talk to. And I just had this moment of like, in the last 3 or 4 months, I've talked with, you being the third person that's really had a love for music for a long time. And one of them is now, a vocal. He helps people with their vocal auditions. That's his main job. But he's also kind of at our age, going back after trying to do it as a performer. And then, I had the opportunity to talk to Jason, who's created and recreated himself as a solo artist and a band artist, and, photography, writing, all that stuff. And then now, talking with you, it's a completely different path, but it's all stemmed from that love for music. You saw the opportunities behind the scenes, but now have also taken your expertise and also gone, hey, I love efficiency. How can I do this better? So maybe talk a little bit about, the high points of the book and how the efficient hustle, what that looks like.
Yeah. Well, I will say, before we even dip into that, I will say, sure. I love that you bring that up, because so many times I feel like I've met so many people over the years who are like, they're a great singer or they really love music or whatever. And then like, they'll mess around with it in high school a little bit, maybe be in choir or something. And then they'll just kind of stop. And that bums me out so much, because it's like, I think, first of all, maybe either they're too scared to try it, or, let's be honest, a lot of times, I think more often than not, it's parents like discouraging it, because they think like, well, why would you want to go into music? Because like the odds of being like the next Rolling Stones, or pick big name band and put, it's like, sure, like that is extremely tough, and it's probably not going to happen. But there are so many careers that are music adjacent, or you could be a vocal coach. You could, so what? Like maybe you're just teaching music, or maybe you're doing vocals and you're a great singer and you're just recording stuff for like commercials. It's like, that's better than a day job if you really love music. So like pursue the heck out of it. Go through college. Like, maybe set your sights on being a rock star. And if that doesn't pan out, there's still a lot of awesome things within the industry, either directly, doing it, or adjacent to it, that can fulfill you way more than some, whatever second tier job that you decided to do because it's safe. Like, so I don't know, I could go on, that's a little tangent there, but I hate to see people that don't pursue whatever they truly love because it's not, quote unquote smart in like society or whatever. It's like, well, I know I can get a job if I go for finance and I'll be an accountant, even though I really want to be a guitar player. Well, then be a guitar player, like just do it.
Yeah. No, thank you for, don't apologize for that rant. I'm so glad that you said that and didn't just go right on to my question, because honestly, Luke, that's like what the heart of this show is about. It's about pursuing your passion. And so sometimes you get to do that as a job. And I love that you said that. Like, if you want to be a guitar player, go be a guitar player. And if that doesn't work out, maybe there's going to be this awesome opportunity to start being a tour manager, or you're going to figure out the behind the scenes stuff. Yeah. Or maybe you are going to go be an accountant, but keep playing your guitar, be in the band at church. Absolutely. Or get in with a group of guys that still plays local shows. Like, even if you're not able to do your passion as your job, don't let that passion go just because mom or dad or a teacher or somebody else told you that it doesn't make sense.
Absolutely. That's all I could encourage people to do. Cause it's like, unless you're so proud that like, unless you hit the top and be a rock star, you're going to feel like a failure. Well, then that's your own thing. But like, get over that. Like, just go have fun with it. Yeah. Like, you could be playing at church on the weekends for fun, or you could be there's a million things. I mean, there's guitar techs and everything else. Like, I could go on and on about things that you could do by pursuing your passion that maybe aren't the exact thing you want it to be, but is still pretty awesome.
Yeah, for sure.
All that to say, I'm a big advocate of like going for what you truly want to do.
I'm interested to know, and again, it's a book. So how do you summarize a book in a couple of minutes? But why would somebody go up and pick up the book? What are kind of the high points? How did you get to them through what you've done?
All right. Yeah. So, I would say first and foremost, I wrote the book for young and like aspiring tour and production managers, either people that want to do it or people that are maybe doing it already earlier in their career. But a good chunk of what I, kind of the primary things that I quote unquote teach or, promote in the book are applicable across the board to all different kinds of industries, walks of life, etc. Number one being like just efficiency, which can mean a million different things. So I think, one thing I really touch on and I believe in is like efficiency with emails. Like, email was amazing until it wasn't. And so like, it used to be like, man, I could write this quick note and send it off and get a response maybe later today, as opposed to like, I got to handwrite a thing, put it in the mail and blah, 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 and like put stamps on it. And then I'll hear back in a week. Like, email's better than that. But now it's come to this crazy culture of just like brain dumping on an email, copying 10 people on it. And then we all get anxiety because our inboxes are full. Like, so in the book, I talk about like efficiency in email, like cut to the point. If someone opens a big email, they're not going to respond to it. They're going to probably not even read it right away until they feel like they have to. So like efficiency, make it quick and to the point, get your point across in as few words as possible. So that's one efficiency. I could go on and on, but there's a whole bunch on that in the book of how efficiency in email works, or my approach to it.
Yeah, that's good.
I think another thing that I really am a believer in is professionalism. Like think back in the day, then there's still an element of it, but back in the day, especially like everybody just looked at touring and touring with bands is like a big party, and like, sure, that does exist, but it's a much different world now. It's like if you go out, you could be touring in, with a band in a van and pulling a trailer, just a little thing, and they could, if they're out touring for a month, they could bring in, $100,000. Like, that's a business, you know what I mean? So
Right.
It's like professionalism. So it's like, act like it, like act like you're running a business. Don't just like be knocking down beers and like partying all the time. Like dress for the part, act the part in person, but also in communication, whether it's emails and texts and phone calls and stuff like that. I'm a big advocate of professionalism and bringing a little bit of that more to the industry, because again, it's like, it's a different world now. And, I like to see that. I like to be, act professional, so you're taken seriously,
Yeah.
If you want to climb in within your industry, then act the part, I guess.
Yeah.
And then I think the other thing, as far as efficiency goes, like another thing that I really am an advocate for in the book, there's a lot of things, but these are just definitely a few bullet points, is just like organization, whether it's, in the physical world, as far as, getting, if you're on the road, you have a road case, organize it so it makes sense to do your job. If you're in the electronic realm a lot more, like organize your digital folders and such, and it's so that they're easily found later. And like if you like in production management, for example, you get a lot of information. Like every venue you play is going to send you a bunch of information about their venue.
Sure.
And like if you don't organize that, you're going to lose track quick. And then you're like, man, what have I read? What have I not read? What have I crossed all my T's, out of my I's, and stuff like that. So I'm a big advocate of organization and keeping everything straight. So when the time comes, you can retrieve it. And also, if you're sharing with others, they know how to find what they're looking for very easily. It's all about saving time and being efficient for ourselves, but for those around us. Like if I send some big, crazy, long email that's going on, then that's wasting someone else's time, and if I show up to a venue unprepared, that's wasting someone else's time. So I think that kind of lends to the professionalism side of it as well. It's like, be considerate of those around you and those that you're working with too, because they'll appreciate it. And you can help everyone's day be better if you're also making sure your day is better,
Yeah, for sure. No, those are great points. And I love that was going to kind of be a follow-up question, and you kind of already answered it. And that is, obviously with what you do, you've got a very niche market, right? But I love that you talked about, hey, the through lines of this book are going to be applicable on almost any industry that you're working on,
Yeah, I think so.
I love that you kind of hit on those points where it is applicable no matter what you're calling your 9 to 5.
Yeah, totally.
One of the other things that you mentioned was, writing has become more of a passion for you. So obviously we've already talked about the book.
Mm-hmm.
Were you doing the blogs? Were you doing the newsletters? Was that prior to the book, or have those come up since the book?
Yeah, I was doing those shortly before the book. Like it all started in the same year. So I started like the Efficient Hustle, which is my website, and kind of the idea of consulting and helping younger bands and younger people kind of get up and running. I started all that. And then I was like, well, I have a website, and to like kind of prove to people that I know what I'm talking about, I started blogging about different tour related subjects. And so I knew pretty quickly that, okay, if I can do a blog about different subjects, I could do a book. But I honestly didn't have much of a desire to do one. And then once I started writing more, I'm like, pretty quickly I realized, I actually enjoy writing. Later that year, I was like, okay, that's kind of when the passion thing, I kind of realized like, I actually really enjoy writing. I should write a book. So that was kind of when I dug into that. And so it started with the blog. And then once I started digging into the book, then I realized I really loved writing a lot. And, now it's like something that I need to do, even if it's just a newsletter or a blog, something kind of to get that creative side out, because I've always said I'm not creative because I don't play music. I don't sing. I can't draw for nothing. But then I didn't realize until, my adult life, once I started writing, like, this is where I'm creative. I can write and make things understandable, et cetera, and tell a story, and so I need to get that creative part out regularly, and blogs help that a lot. And when, because at some point I'd love to do another book, but right now busy doing all these other things and promoting the current book that I'm not ready to dig in yet. So at least if I can do something on a regular basis, just to kind of scratch that itch,
What you just said there made me think of a quote from Mr. Rogers that I've
Awesome.
shared with my kids much more than once. It coincides, but it made me think of it. So there would be no art and there would be no science if human beings had no desire to create. And if we had everything we ever needed or wanted, we would have no reason for creating anything. But it's that first part that I really love. What I talk to my kids about is so many times we think, like you just said, that creativity has to be creating music. It has to be singing. It has to be, being an actor or drawing or sculpting. And it's like, no, it's just feeding that creative side of us that, if Einstein hadn't have been creative, we wouldn't have had all the theories that he proved. It's so many times we do the right brain, left brain thing when it comes to creativity. And, even the fact that you mentioned entrepreneurship, that's a whole other type of creativity.
Mm-hmm.
So I just really try to keep that imagination. Like, I'm like, okay, get your face out of your screen for a little bit. Go, if you don't want to go play make believe, go at least read a book or something, because we have to keep those creative juices flowing, because that's where great ideas come from, whether they're, art or music or anything else that always falls into that creative world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, everybody has their thing, which, some people it's music, some people it's drawing, whatever, painting. But whatever it is, definitely go for it.
What's been your biggest success, or what are you the most proud of as you look back over the years?
Well, I have a couple of things written down for that. We can go in a couple different ways, and I think we should. But because we're kind of still just following up on the book, I will say, obviously I did all the book I did myself. Like, I didn't even attempt to go through a publisher or whatever. I didn't like the idea and whatever. So I did it all myself. So like writing and publishing, self-publishing a book from start to finish, knowing zero about that world.
Yeah.
I'm pretty proud of that. And I'm glad that I did it, and I'm proud that it's out. But I think honestly, even more so than just doing it, when I, now I've had it happen multiple times, but when I started getting messages, people hitting me up on social media or whatever, or emailing that I didn't know, had no idea who they were or how they found out about the book. And they hit me up and say, man, I just read your book. It was so perfect. I really needed it. It's so helpful and blah, blah, blah. Like, to me, that was like, man, like, target hit. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, that cool.
Was always the goal. It was never about money or being best times, New York Times. So I don't care about that. It was about helping people. And when I heard from people that I had, no ties to, who just found the book and learned and appreciated it, that to me was a huge accomplishment. That was awesome. That's such a good feeling to know that I helped people, because that's what it was all about from the beginning.
I love that.
I was like, man, I've been touring forever. I have all this knowledge. Well, what good is it if I just keep it to myself? I should share with people who, I was in their spot at some point. So that was a big thing for me. I think, obviously, I'm a private pilot, like getting my pilot's license was a huge accomplishment, and something I'm pretty proud of, because, I just remember being in the thick of it and before I had my license and learning. And I just remember at one point thinking, like, man, if I didn't know people who had their pilot's license already, I would think that this was literally impossible. Like, you have to learn so many different things you have to learn about weather, and you have to learn about small engines and aerodynamics. And I was just like, this is insane. How am I ever, if I didn't know people that have done this before me, I would think that there is no way you can learn all these things about all these things.
Right.
So because of that, having done it, I'm like, okay, I'm pretty proud of that. And it was extremely hard, and I'm grateful that I've done it. But I think on a more Iowa level / recent is, like, honestly, completing RAGBRAI 2023.
Very cool.
I rode every mile and then some. And that was it was not my first year. I'd done it a chunk of times before, but man, that was a beast.
It was so hot that week.
It was long. It was hilly. It got extremely hot. And there were definitely moments where, like, man, I don't know exactly how this is going to turn out. But that one, I'm pretty proud of that thing. I've done a lot of RAGBRAIs, but none of them have I felt like so accomplished. That that was a challenge for sure.
Yeah.
So I would put that up there.
Very cool. Yeah, that was definitely a tough route. And like you said, it was so hot that week.
Yeah, it was crazy. And I think, all right, so then on a very personal level, one thing that I always say I'm very proud of is, and it has an Iowa tie as well, is I designed my wife's wedding ring. So I worked with the there was a local jeweler in Des Moines who I worked with. And
Wow.
I say that because you know, we had started to shop around a little bit, and I started seeing all these jewelry, and it was like, you know, made in China. I'm like, really? Even jewelry? Like, you can't get anything just made here. I was like, I don't like that. So I was like, I want to. So anyways, long story short, you know, I worked with this jeweler for a handful of months, and you know, we bounced ideas back and forth, and I kind of like writing a book. I knew nothing about jewelry, and I still don't, but I knew enough to make it happen, or, you know, they taught me enough along the way and walked me through it. So I was pretty proud of that, because I went in knowing nothing and came out with something that's pretty cool, and she loves
That's
the final
amazing,
product.
man.
So that's always been something on my mind. Like, I'm pretty proud of that. Like, I worked really hard and to make that happen, and it like worked out. I'm like, all right, that's cool.
Yeah, you absolutely should be proud of that. That's very cool. What about what's been one of your biggest setbacks or struggles that you've had to face, and how did you overcome it? How did you push through?
Man, well, there's probably a million. A lot of them are in the book.
A lot of them are in the book. Is that what you said?
A lot of them are in the book, and you know, I talk about lessons learned from the mistakes and whatever. But I think honestly, one thing that comes to mind a lot lately for me is my own, like, I feel like I've stunted my own growth a few times throughout the course of my career. Being like, you know, for example, I would get comfortable and just say, okay, I got a job, I'm touring, I'm making money, I'm paying my bills, I'm good, you know. And then maybe I would, because everything was good, and I knew, you know, as a freelancer, there's always that one little, you know, the uncertainty of like, man, you're only as good as your last gig, and then once you're working, and then all of a sudden you're not. So you know, so as a freelancer, if I was like working and making money, like, okay, that's cool, and I was touring, which is, you know, something that I wanted to be doing at the time. So I would just I would get a little too comfortable and not pursue, like, not try to climb the ladder, or do bigger tours, make more money, get whatever, get more industry experience at a higher level. And so I kind of, you know, looking back, I wish I would have. Like, I would, the fire would be lit when it needed to be. Like, okay, I need to like make more money, or, you know, whatever the situation may be, I needed to like find a different artist to work with. And because the artist I work for now is about to make an album, and they're going to be off the road for a year. So like, then I would light the fire and find a new gig.
Sure.
But I would never, you know, too often I got comfortable and I wouldn't climb. I didn't put a focus on career growth. You know what I mean? So I think that was kind of a self-imposed, you know, thing that I wish I wouldn't have gotten so comfortable at certain times in my career.
No, that's great insight. You know, it made me think, I think two of the things that you used the word stunted your own growth, but I think that two of the things that, like you said, stunt growth or get us stuck in a spot are kind of on two opposite ends of the spectrum. One is comfort, but the other one's fear. You know, I mean, one of them is like, hey, no, I'm good where I'm at. And the other one is like, oh my gosh, I'm afraid to do this, you know, and it's like kind of two opposite things. But I think that's the thing I hear the most when people get stuck somewhere is it's kind of on one of those two spectrums. You know, you can get yourself so afraid of trying something new, or you just get comfortable. It's just interesting how those two kind of, I don't know about play off each other, but how they're almost opposites when you look at it.
Man, well, let me say, like, I'm glad that you brought that up, because, you know, I guess the second answer to your question is like, what have I done to overcome whatever problems I face? You know, and I say that because, like, right now, fear is like a huge thing for me. My last newsletter, I do a newsletter first Tuesday of every month, and my last one that came out, I think it was last week, was all about fear, and exactly that thing. Because now more than ever, it becomes so evident to me on a daily basis, like, fear creeps in, man, and it will shut you down in a hurry. And you have to notice it. First of all, you have to notice it, and then second of all, you have to counteract it, or it will shut you down. And, you know, that's why so many people, whether it's, you know, like we were saying earlier, of like the musician who wants to go to college for music but's too scared because they don't think it'll pan out, or, you know, someone that, you know, like I said later in my career, where I'm like, oh, I should try to do this next thing, but it's so scary that then I just don't do it. And so how I counteract that, or, you know, my approach to solving that problem now is like being very self-aware. And like, if I'm like one day jazzed about something, and the next day I'm like, maybe not. Maybe I should do that. And I really catch myself and like, well, why? Because yesterday you were pumped about it. So why wouldn't you want to do it today? And it's always fear. It's always nerves. It's being scared of like, let's be honest, it's almost always fear of failure, you know?
Yeah.
And it's like I said in my newsletter, like if you haven't tried something before, well, you also haven't failed at it yet. So like, why should you be so fearful of failure if you haven't even failed at it? Like, give it a shot. And if you quote unquote fail, well, at least you tried it and you won't feel so bad. But like, I think, earlier in my career, it was like getting that comfort zone. You know, it was always fear as a production manager, like getting a job that I was maybe felt was over my head and letting people down, but it's like everything I've ever, every job I got that was a little nerve wracking or seemed a little too big for me always went fine. And, so it's like, that's the thing is like most of our fears are unfounded anyways. And, because you're going to take if you're doing it right, you're going to take the right steps to get to what you want to get to anyways. If you take some crazy big leap, then it's going to be more scary, but also it might still work out. So I don't know.
Yeah.
Fear is a big thing for me lately. It's just like catch it and then counteract it and like talk yourself out of that mess. Because fear will shut you down and you will never move forward ever. And that is crazy because, there's so many things that don't get done or don't happen or ideas that don't ever get out because somebody's afraid. It's like, man, don't let that happen.
Yeah. Yep. Just a couple, when you started talking about fear, you said fear creeps in. And I wrote that down because it's so true. Usually it's not like my son loves movies with jump scares. That's not how fear works in real life. It's not you open a door and it's right there. It's like, it's that voice that starts real quiet. And then all of a sudden you're having anxiety because you didn't, like you said, grab it and take control of it. So I don't love it. I hate it, but that's such a good point that fear creeps in.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why you have to be very self-aware and be like, okay, if I'm changing my mind about something, like, why is that? Is it based on something real or is it just me being scared? And it's probably just scared. Like, I know for myself personally, that's almost always what it is. It's just like, it's not based on anything other than just being nervous about trying something or whether it's letting other people down or just myself down or whatever, but it's like, you got to get over that.
Yep, for sure. So as you are getting over your fear, what's a dream or a goal that you haven't reached yet?
Well, kind of like the next thing that I'm working on, really interested in is like the idea of entrepreneurship. I said, I really want to buy a business, and that puts all the fear into me. Like that's something like one day I'm pumped about it, and the next day I'm like, what
am I doing?
Man, yeah, exactly. Like, what am I doing? I don't know anything about running a business. But the reality of it is like, production management, there's so many skills that translate to other industries as a production manager. And so, between that and just reading and learning and listening to podcasts and reading books and whatever about, my interest in entrepreneurship is really motivated me to try it and to try something new. And honestly, hopefully a way to get off the road and at least to the extent that I want. I mean, being on the road for many years takes its toll, and I still like it and I love to travel and stuff, but I also now more than ever love being home. I live in Nashville where I actually own a home and stuff like that. The entrepreneurship for me is like really lighting my fire right now. And like the idea of buying a business, like I said, like starting a business is a whole nother thing that I'm interested in, but I want to kind of run a business first and see what that's all about. But also I don't totally have a business that I would start. I don't have an idea for a great business right now. Yeah. So like, why not go find someone who has, and maybe they're ready to retire or something and jump in there. So that's like that's lighting my fire big time right now is the idea of doing that and learning everything about it. First of all, finding a business that I want to buy and run, but also how to do it and financing for it and all those things. That's kind of a big thing for me right now.
Very cool.
Sorry to step on you.
No,
I
please.
just want to finish my thought, I guess, is because that's like my primary thing, but also, promoting the book still, which is kind of an ongoing thing. That's a big deal to me because, like I said, I've found people it's found its way to people that I wrote it for, and I want it to find its way to a lot more of those people. So that's another thing that I'm putting some energy into, as well.
On that piece specifically, I love, that it could be for the tour manager or something like that. But also when you're just getting started as a band, you probably don't have a manager, or if
right,
you're probably managing yourself. And I think about the bands that I know when they were getting started, if they had, kind of a how-to guide, because a lot of them didn't have the business. None of the members of the band had like the business background or how this works. In my head, I can just think of how helpful that would be for a band that's, going out on the road to have that resource for them.
Yeah, totally. And that's, I wrote it for that or with that in mind. Like I wanted to be for, first and foremost, tour and production managers, but also, of course, bands, like there's a ton that they can learn in there. And there's, like I said, it also expands beyond the tour and production industry to a lot of people who just want to learn efficiencies and implement that into their daily life. And then at the end of the day, for people who have no interest in any of that, there's also just a bunch of stories of what it took to tour a band around the world, So there's that too, like just the stories part of it. So it definitely reaches well beyond tour and production management. And there's a lot of stuff to be learned, but also just a lot of interesting stories and craziness of, traveling around the world with a bunch of people and a bunch of stuff.
Well, I will say for two reasons the book is of interest to me. One, because, I always thought it would be cool to be a rock star, and so the stories are definitely, I'm like, okay, I want to read some of those. But the timing of this conversation is really interesting, and I'll share something. I'll try to keep it as brief as possible, but I'm working on I would say creating a process. I mean, it's something that we're already doing at work, but it doesn't really have a process behind it. And I had this realization through a couple of different, I'll leave one of the stories out of it, but I had this conversation with a coworker last week. I'm like, this is not a strong suit of mine. Creating processes is not something that I'm good at. I've been trying to figure how to just even put this on paper or put this in Excel or something, or a table for a few hours. And then, my coworker just turns around and does it in like a half hour, and I'm like, I had this big realization last week. I'm like, I'm not good at this. I would like to be better at it. But right now it makes a whole lot more sense for me to utilize a colleague and ask them to help me with this, because I'm not good at it. I think I do a pretty good job of, like, once a process is in place, finding inefficiencies, finding where we can improve it, but actually putting that process in place, I'm like, that is not my strong suit. And I had this conversation with a coworker last week, and, she jumped in and, nailed it.
So I can say, like, that ties directly to the touring industry as well. But I'm a bit, and I even mentioned it in the book, is like, it's okay to admit that you need help or that you don't know something, because we all have our strong suits and we all have our weaknesses.
Yeah.
So, like, play off others' strengths, and then, like, let them, like, when they have a weakness that you can help, then help them. And, like, as far as touring goes, I mean, there's guitar techs who can do, I can't tune a guitar. I can't change a guitar string. I don't know how to do it, but we need those people on tour. And just like they need me to, like, advance the show and do all my production management stuff. And, like, everyone helps everyone on a tour. Like, you're not on that tour, you're not taking up space on a tour bus unless you know what you're doing really well. But you don't know everything. You don't even know everything about live production or shows or whatever. Like, most lighting guys can't do much with audio, and vice versa.
Yep.
Everybody has their strengths and weaknesses. So be willing to admit your weakness and be willing to share your strengths. I'm a big advocate of just saying, like, man, I don't know this, and I'm okay with that. I think that goes back to the fear part of, being scared of looking like an idiot, or being scared to being looked down upon, or having people look at you like, oh, well, this person doesn't know anything. It's like, no, I know things, just not this thing.
Not this
That's
thing.
okay.
Yeah. Well, hey, as we're kind of running up toward the end here, I do want to ask you, especially since you've written a book, are you a reader? Do you enjoy reading books as well? Man,
I read as much as I can squeeze into my schedule. I love reading. I try to read every day. I try to read a lot of, almost mostly nonfiction, like entrepreneurial kind of stuff. And I don't know if self-help is the right word, but like, James Clear, Atomic Habits, and like,
just finished that one.
The deep work guy, Cal, Tim Ferriss. Like, I'm a huge Tim Ferriss guy, all things Tim Ferriss. So yeah, I read a lot.
Good. So what, and I'm not going to go down the whole favorite top three, but maybe what are the three that have impacted you the most in the last year or two?
Yeah. I mean, so many for sure over time, but I would say, let me pick a little bit of everything. Especially I have a couple here that kind of relate back to some of my passions as well. So there's one, Man's Search for Meaning by, I can't remember, Man's Search for Meaning.
Man's Search for Meaning. Okay.
Yep. That's a super good one about a Holocaust survivor. And just like, just read that. And then you'll just realize like whatever you think your bad day is not that bad.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
So that's motivation to just keep going. It's just like, just get over it, move on. That's a great book. I think as far as, the longevity piece that I mentioned earlier, there's this book by Rich Roll, Finding Ultra. I read that within the last 6 months or so. That one's super good because it's like, about exercise and that kind of stuff. Like this guy's story of, from like having a job he didn't like and being an alcoholic all the way to like being this crazy ultra marathon guy. And like, he's just awesome. I'm a big fan of his podcast as well. Okay. So I highly recommend that book. I recommend the Rich Roll podcast. Recommend that all the way around. And it's like, it's not just like, there's some motivational pieces to it. There's some, workout and diet and that kind of stuff too. So a great book. I think recently, and as it applies to the like entrepreneurship and owning a business that I'm currently looking into, is a book called You Are a Badass at Making Money, which is one of the Jensen Sarah books she has. I think her first book was You Are a Badass. And then now this one's You're a Badass at Making Money. That was just really inspirational and like motivational to the idea of like, her thing is like some of what we've been saying of like, don't let fear shut you down. But also just the idea of like, it's okay to say you want to be rich. Like in our culture, it's a bad thing to be like, I want to be rich. And it's like, I don't want to be ultra rich and like float around some yacht, but like, I would love to have enough money that money's not a concern. And like, at this point in my life, I would like to do a lot more, like donating money and helping
philanthropy.
That's the word. Yeah. I would love at this point in my life, I would love to get into more philanthropic stuff. And, that's where money comes in, or just the idea of like, if you're at a restaurant and somebody's a great waiter, like just tip them big, like don't even think about it. So
make their day.
So this book has really helped inspire me to do that, is like chase the money. Cause we have this idea in our culture that money's bad. It's like money inspires bad things, but money itself is not bad and money can actually do a lot of good. And that I would love to get to a point where I can be less concerned with money and just do more of the philanthropic stuff and donating my time even, because that's another thing that I'm really interested in these days is just the idea of mentorship. And so I would love to do more of that and not be concerned with getting paid for it or whatever, just helping people for the sake of helping people.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So I think those are three books that I really would recommend right now. And then, above and beyond is the Tim Ferriss's 4-Hour Work Week. that one checked so many boxes and motivated me in so many ways that like changed my life for sure. And a lot of it, or some of it was entrepreneurship related before I was into that stuff or ready for it. Yeah. But so many of the other things, just kind of like, I look at it like my book as like, there's some things in there that didn't hit home for me, but there's some things that did, and I think that's good. So there's a lot of things in that book that continue to inspire and motivate me. But honestly, I kind of base the idea of my book around that on some level of like, this won't resonate with everyone, but some things will and some things won't. So those are a chunk of books, and I can go on all day about the books I read and why I love them because there's so many good ones. But it all kind of depends on your preference and what you're aspiring to be or do.
Right. Well, and I think that's why I try to do more reading. I listen to a lot of audiobooks because it's like, even if like you said, even if the whole thing doesn't land, I'm always taking 2 or 3 or 10 things away, from every book that I read or listen to.
Totally, man. I've learned so much. I just love reading because it's like, man, what am I going to learn today?
Right. This has been a lot of fun, Luke. I'm always like, oh, wow. Yeah, we're coming up on an hour already. So
yeah, that's crazy. I feel like we just scratched the surface. We could go.
I know. Well, and so that's a great segue because we have only scratched the surface. Where can the listeners find out more about you, or how can they get in touch with you?
Cool. Yeah, they can find out about me, get in touch with me, and find out more about the book all at my website, which is theefficienthustle.com. Instagram and Facebook, same stuff. It's just at The Efficient Hustle. I'm hit and miss with social media. I try to do, better about it because I do think it's important. I think that people can pick up a lot of info of good stuff from there.
Yeah.
And it's good to counteract all the bad. And then, I'm trying to be more active on the LinkedIn stuff, especially as I lean more towards the entrepreneurial side. You can search, I don't even know what the LinkedIn vibe is, but just search my name. I'm sure it'll come up.
Yeah.
Those are the primary means. But yeah, you can always reach out to me via my website. There's a contact thing there, a contact link, and you can hit me up there. And all the more info on the book and my blogs and all kinds of stuff. And part of my blog is I try to do often as I can a Q&A with other people, kind of like a written version of a podcast,
Okay.
So I do Q&As with other industry pros and people that I know or have acquaintances. So that's cool to check out. But yeah, those are the primary ways to get a hold of me. And I love hearing from people. Especially, if they've just come across my stuff and are digging it, or maybe they read the book and tell me what they like. I love hearing from people just in general. So please reach out.
Well, Luke, thanks again for your time. This has been an awesome conversation.
Yeah, absolutely, man.
It's been a lot of fun. For everybody out there, The Efficient Hustle, like Luke said, this is originally geared toward music industry, touring managers and bands, but lots of good stuff, especially knowing he's, got Tim Ferriss and James Clear as his author mentors. So definitely check that out. And most importantly, keep pursuing your passion.
If you have questions or would like to contact us, please check out the show details for contact information. Thanks for listening to the Pursue Your Passion podcast.